Okay, YouTubers. This now is about the ridiculous slander that Sally Todd put forth about Jack Webb, which is well. Anyway, okay, I'm just going to go through a person who had interviewed her was kind enough to send me copies of the pages from her book Notorious that has this in it, and I couldn't get the book itself, though. It seems Amazon's out of copies and doesn't know when or if they're going to get any more. Um, anyway, she said that he had hired her on an interview for a teenage part on Dragnet, and dialogue was mechanical, not accustomed to it. I needed a dialogue coach. Well, the thing is, he was using teleprompters even back then. He's one of the first to be doing that. So I don't see how that would be such a problem. He'd hired me on looks alone and had a crush on me. The shoot was 3 weeks away, and he didn't know that I couldn't handle the dialogue. So anyway, first he's pleasurable and proper, whole top floor of a soundstage custom built for him. Yes, that's true. With private elevators, I don't know, I forgot to ask about that. I got a hold of the person who didn't meet him, but had been engaged to his daughter Stacy after he died, before she died. Elevators and secret panels. Well, that person it was very close. The girls stayed close to their stepmother, Jackie Lowry, and this fellow is kind of like her de facto son. And so anyway, there was probably a private elevator. I forgot to ask about that. There was no indication of any secret rooms or anything. Yes, he had a Filipino houseboy. Whether it was run so precisely that if a glass was off one fraction of an inch, it had to be redone or not, I don't know. Anyway, she says she was impressed with this, that, and the other. And he treated his crew and cast really harsh. Well, yeah, that happened. That sort of thing did happen. And he ripped into her a bit on not having the words exactly out the way he wanted them. Probably exaggerated. Anyway, she said it was a short, stormy relationship, and he had been kind and sweet and furnished an apartment for me. I hung on until I got more checks. In another interview, she said that he had got an apartment for her that was nearby so he could see her whenever he wanted to. So far, she hadn't slept with him. I'd heard he was strange, but I did not know how strange. My sister lived with me, and I used her as an excuse not to bring him home. And then he had a writer, Norm Jolly, go over and romance my sister to keep her busy. There was a person named Norm Jolly. I don't know if he was married or not. Like she says, I don't know anything about whether this happened. I don't know if she even had a sister. There's nothing I can find about it that makes reference to having one. We had been out to dinner at someone's house, and he'd been drinking intensely. When we got back to his place, he said he wanted to show me something private, which I could not talk about because it was a secret. He went to the wall panel, pressed a button on it, and slid out behind the bookcase. There, hidden, was a small, dimly lit room with candles and a red light. There was a little bed built into the wall. It's hard to tell if that's a Murphy bed or a niche, probably the latter. And all the music collection was there, where he could enjoy listening in the soundproofed room. Okay. That apartment did have a listening room. Whether it was soundproof or not, I don't know, but it was certainly no big secret thing. We went to the wall panel. Let me see now. Where is this? He told me it was one of his music rooms. Well, if he had his entire collection in there, there had to be only, she just said that he had, I think he had, before he died, he had 6,000 jazz records. And what did she say? All of his music collection was there. It probably wasn't 6,000 at that point, but it was certainly enough. So if he had a listening room that Jackie knew about, it wasn't this one. So there couldn't have been more than one. If this had all of his music collection, this is nonsense. Anyway, it was a beautiful, scary little place. She goes in anyway. He made love to me on the bed and said, "Now don't get nervous. This is something that just entertains me." I looked up and I thought he was taking off his belt, but it was a holster on his naked body. Okay, stop a second. Now, in all this weirdness that she describes, she does not mention that he comes to bed naked except for a holster. You can take it for granted he came to bed naked. You don't even have to mention that. Now, when somebody goes to work in the morning, they put on certain types of clothes. They put on a shirt. So if you're describing someone who had to take off his shirt later because it was too hot, you don't say, well, he put on his shirt and then he went to work. Because you just take it for granted he went to put on his shirt to go to work. The only thing unusual is when he takes the shirt off. Then you mention it. But you take it for granted it was on to begin with. Now, she acts like it's perfectly normal to come to bed naked wearing a belt. Because she doesn't mention, she doesn't say, she doesn't say, he made love to me. He came to bed wearing his belt and makes a comment. I mean, you'd think the belt buckle would bother her. Would depending on the size and shape of the buckle, position of it, I suppose. But, there's no comments about it being unusual that he wore a belt to bed. I mean, is this some kind of a etiquette from those days or something? I just imagine some etiquette book. Now, if you are lawfully married to a woman you're going to make love with, you can take off your belt. But if you are not lawfully married to a woman that you're going to make love with, you must cover your belly button. You can show her anything. She can see your junk. You can put your junk in her, but you cannot show her your belly button. Not if you're going to be a proper gentleman. You've got to wear that belt a bit. As if this is normal behavior, it doesn't get mentioned. Just like it's normal behavior to put your shirt on to go to work, it doesn't get mentioned. The only thing unusual is when you're going to take it off. Like it's unusual that he's taking a belt off. Why wasn't it unusual enough that he didn't take it off before he got to bed? And a belt normally has loops, so we have to take off the pants, sliding the belt out of the loops and put it back on. Why isn't this mentioned in addition to, that's weird enough in itself. She leaves that out. Why? It sounds like she slung the story together off the top of her head without thinking. Except probably drew on something or other that, in fact, one of the people, I don't recall, was the original interviewer, who may have been the same person that sent me these copies. At this point, I don't remember. I don't want to open up my email right now to double check. But she had mentioned this before and said, but I'm wait for another time to talk about that, the secret room. And in the story about it, in one of it, he said, I think it was in the email, he said to me that she acted like she wanted to say something more, but couldn't bring herself to. So maybe this sounds almost like a ritualistic kind of room. And I kind of wonder what she was involved with or had been acquainted with before. She probably, it might have included symbols and stuff on the room or something. But I doubt it was something he had. In fact, he always wore a St. Francis and sometimes some other saint medal for luck on him. So, I doubt very much. If he had candles at all, it's probably, there's no mention of burning candles or saint or practicing any religion. But he was apparently, he had some Catholic upbringing, if not so much by his mother, as they received help from Our Lady of Loretto, and he apparently was altar boy for some of their services, but not actually attend the school there. He was attending a secular school. There's some confusion on that, but I guess that's just one book about him doesn't even mention Our Lady of Loretto. So anyway, I looked up and I thought he was taking off his belt, but it was a holster on his naked body. Okay, why doesn't she notice the holster before? Well, now that's understandable, because if it's at the side of his body that's not towards her, and you got reduced lighting, you're not going to notice it. But why don't you notice this belt? Why is it not mentioned that why didn't she say something like, I thought it was a little strange, but the whole thing was strange, so the belt didn't look like the buckle was going to bother me, so I didn't say anything. Why didn't she say something like that? She doesn't. She acts like it's totally normal to wear a belt to bed when you're naked. It's just so normal, you just don't mention it. Just take it for granted it's there. The only thing unusual is when he's going to take it off. Except he wasn't taking it off. He was maneuvering the holster around. Jack's moves were smooth and as if he had done this so many times before. He held a gun, small but deadly. Is it loaded or not? Who knows? Is the safety on or not? Who knows? All this time we were making love, and yet I saw his hand in the gun coming round from the side, a foot from my head. I thought Jack might snap and kill me. I elbowed him so hard that I knocked the wind out of him. I took a big chance because he could have shot me, but I had to get out of there. He pretended as though it was nothing. I didn't tell him off. I simply grabbed my dress and ran home. Jack sent me flowers the next day and asked me out to lunch and blah and blah and blah. Years later, women who had dated Jack only once would speak to me, and I would say the gun thing, right? And they would say yes. Jackie went for it. Jackie was tough, Brooklyn girl, and I think she liked tough guys. She looked like a Dresden doll size too, but she was Irish with green eyes and red hair. She'd been Miss America. Jackie married Jack Webb, and 3 years later, he married someone else. Okay. First off, I can't get a hold of anybody who can tell me one way or another whether he was ever into sex on the first date. And back in those days, the argument, back into the 60s and some in the 70s, the argument was, should you kiss on the first date, not should you have sex on the first date. That argument developed like in the 90s and 2000s. Gradually, society got more depraved. It looks like he was basically looking for getting to know the person, find out if there's some spark, some romance happen, because he wants that, not just getting sex. And so I doubt there were any women that dated him just once and had opportunity to experience the gun thing. In other words, he's fiddling with a gun while he's having sex with her. But I don't know for dead sure, so we'll just leave that aside. However, Jackie doesn't really quite fit this. She said something somewhere about, As it turned out, Jack had been going with Jackie Lowry, who I didn't like, and she hated me. Her de facto son said that actually she liked Sally Todd. Okay. So there's one thing she got wrong. Anyway, she, I don't know if she exactly looks like a Dresden doll size too, but I can't tell size on stuff very well. But here, he says, Jackie married Jack Webb, and 3 years later, he married someone else. No. He had been married to Dorothy Towne, Towne, for 2 calendar years. I think it was probably more like a year and several months. And they broke up. All his wives who divorced him said that they claimed abandonment because he was so wrapped up in his work he loved too much. He was never home and never spent any time with them. For a while, he managed to correct this with Jackie Lowry. He moved her into that apartment. Okay. Now, later on, he persuaded her to quit her career, whatever that was, and that's when the shit started to hit the fan. Just like with, what's her name, the first wife, Julie London, who seems to have been a conflicted person regarding that sort of thing. She talked about preferring to be a homebody, and yet on the other hand, she said it was the biggest mistake in her life to agree to give up the career. But on the other hand, her second husband had to use a lot of pressure to get her back to singing and staying there. So I don't know. But anyway, and in the biography of her on Scribd, apparently, if I recall correctly, some of the trouble started because her career was doing good and his was starting to tank. And so there was a little sexist jealousy or something involved on his part. But the thing is that, okay, she said that they had, what'd you say? I had my sister answer the phone and put him off. I didn't want to make an enemy of Jack because he could have killed my television career, but I continued to work, even after I broke it off with him. Now, the Jackie Lowry thing, he had been going through some stresses on and off with Dorothy Towne before and during the marriage, and during the breakup, he apparently may have looked around for someone that he could love. But my guess is he sort of like was comfortable loving from a distance and tagging bases with them periodically, and just thinking about them and knowing that they're there in his life. Whereas the women wanted a steady diet of the attention he'd given them initially, and they weren't neurologically wired so much for that kind of distant sort of thing. And a lot of unexamined assumptions and unexamined expectations were involved on both their parts. His last wife was an accountant, and she and he talked everything out ahead of time. And an accountant is going to be focused on facts, not assumptions and so on. Just, this has got to make sense. What is this figure here? What is this there? Why is there something there? What is going on here? She's not going to be leaving anything unexamined. That's not her nature as an accountant. Unless she's leading a very compartmentalized life, and apparently she wasn't. So they got everything sorted out ahead of time and had no problems, but their relationship was a little bit short because he died. He had been, he didn't want to have a heart operation. He didn't want to change his diet. So eventually this happened. He had a heart attack and died. Now, he had been married to Town for 2 years. He then married Jackie Lowry in 58. Now, this gal says, a stormy short relationship. He'd been kind and sweet and furnished an apartment for me. I hung on until I got more checks. I had never slept with him. Well, right there, you got a case where he flat out said he had a crush on her. And he wasn't pressuring for sex, and it took months to get around to it, or at least weeks, and certainly not the first date. But I just played it cool. I heard he was strange, but did not know how strange. Let's see, where is that? Something about we dated all that summer. She used that phrase here, I think. She used it in the interview that is on YouTube. Well, anyway, supposedly, she did say in the interview, we dated all that summer. Well, no, you didn't. Because that summer, okay, she appears in 2 Dragnet episodes, one in 58 and one in 59. And this would have to be, the incident she claims happened, would have had to have happened between these 2 times, okay? According to one of those things that talks about who is or was, since they're dead, dating who and shag tree and all that bunch, they call it shag tree because they assume if you're going out with somebody, you're going to be having sex with them. Even if you only went out once. And according to those sources, which would be drawing on biographies and old news items and whatever, gossip, she was dating him in March and April of 1958. In June of 1958, he married Jackie Lowry. He moved her into that apartment. This incident supposedly happened while she was living there. Because now, she says, I gave up the apartment and moved to Hollywood. Oh, yeah, he says that 3 years later he married someone else. No, it was 16 years later he married after Jackie Lowry. And during that time he had some long-term relationships that failed, just like the marriages did, but probably for the same reasons. But at least he didn't have to shell out big bucks cash settlements to them. Probably why he didn't marry them. There was one he was wanting to marry, and she was refusing him probably because she figured he would stop being so attentive if she was married to him. basically a lot of marriages and stuff and courtship, it's like bait and switch. And women do the same thing too sometimes. But it's like, and part of it's, I think, some social thing, part of it's unexamined assumptions and premises. You really get to know a person better if you're hanging out with them and their friends than if you're going on formal dates and stuff. And seeing them only interacting with you and then putting their best foot forward, which probably won't continue once you're married. I mean, it's almost like a bait and switch thing. I gave up the apartment and moved to Hollywood, but wanted to get back to the gay community and my friends. So she wrote this after the term gay was established as a homosexual term, so I guess she was a fag hag. And that's when my accident happened. So many people came to help me. She got in a car accident. They had known Jack Webb and thought that he had put me through something, beat her up, in other words. He had a bad reputation for that type of thing. Well, I haven't been able to I haven't been able to find out anything much, but there's no indication of anything like that in the stories that are in any of the books or articles I've read so far. And he always seems to have been the perfect gentleman thing, but I mean, I suppose he might have slapped somebody around he caught cheating on him, I don't know. The only episode, anything that sounds like physical abuse, was a hint of that in the Julie London relationship in her biography, which didn't sound like, it wasn't detailed or anything. I suspect it was probably a mutual shoving match or something. But he had very thin skin and it was very easy to hurt him, and I suppose if sometimes when your feelings get hurt, you have a physical pain reaction to it. And I don't know. It's anyway, Jackie married Jack Webb, and 3 years later he married someone else. No, it was 16 years later when he married Opal Wright. This gal's got a lot of things wrong. And she says, we dated that whole summer. Well, that would have had to have been the summer of 58 when he was on his honeymoon in that apartment with Jackie Lowry. And yeah, he had a music listing room, and it wasn't secret behind a bookcase or anything else. And this whole thing is, has got really serious internal problems. The timing on it, her the fact that she didn't think it unusual enough to mention he came to bed with the belt on. She only starts talking about him when she thinks he's taking it off. So it's just, I think she made this up. And I think it's not inconceivable that the sort of room she described, because often when you're telling a story that's a lie, you draw on material you already know about. Maybe somebody she knew had a setup similar to this. But the internal problem of not mentioning him, leaving the belt on, or taking the trouble to take it disconnected from the pants and put it on before he comes to bed. The fact that, Jackie's de facto son would have been in a position to ask her about what was in that apartment. She lived in there for, I don't know, a few years probably. And how is this going to go down when she's living there? And he's on his honeymoon with her, and, this does not make sense. So, the pictures I've seen of her, I doubt she was so much in that S&M thing. This is, anyway, so, anyway, the description she gives of him being so rough on her about handling the dialogue and stuff is he wasn't usually that rough on any of his actors unless it was something to do with the technical equipment. If it was some human error, he'd really rip into them. But there was one guy, he had him cowering and humiliated and scared to move after yelling and screaming at him about something. I think it was one of the actors, but I don't see why it would take 32 takes to get something right regarding intonation or something when using teleprompters, which he was using. It's not that much trouble to get. You don't have to memorize anything, so after one or two minor errors in the delivery style, it should be easy setup. Now, the interview, which is on YouTube, was conducted by this guy. It's Richard Menards, who writes for Montecito's Journal. It's a town in California, and it seems to be, really expensive houses, rich people and stuff. And they, he had been with CNN and other things. But the interesting thing is that her book's published by something called I'm not sure the pronunciation, Dana, AES space DANA. Now, this is a term which refers to the old Irish Tuatha De Danann when they are considered to be the same as their old gods, which actually they weren't. There were some bunch of people that moved in there that were held in considerable esteem by those who replaced them, for whatever reason. And there's at least one metal rock performer who uses that term about himself, and it seems that in the list of things that Stana's YouTube channel has, includes some of this kind of music. Now, Stana is a limited liability corporation or company, LLC. It's not registered in California. It is linked to an address in California. It has a whole bunch of other companies or businesses linked to it. I found it in Delaware. Now, I stumbled on this bit of information I'm about to give you, perhaps by divinely guided accident or something like that, or maybe just accident. Maybe everybody knows it except me, and I was slow to find out about it. Maybe you already know about this, but I'll tell you anyway. In most states like California, when you go look up the corporate filing on something, the state's records of corporation being incorporated, you will find information about the top level management and a few other people and various things. You go to Nevada, you're only going to get the top level management, very tip top, if they're incorporated in Nevada. But in Delaware, you're not going to get any information at all. And you may go, well, gee, that's seems to be perfect for some kind of illegal purposes or something you want to keep hidden, associations you don't want people to know about that your company has. Well, yes, it's true, and it was probably the reason the laws were written that way, because Delaware was owned lock, stock, and barrel by the DuPont family, of which the less said the better. So you got something that's incorporated out of Delaware operating way out of state. There's only two likely reasons for it. They're up to something they want to hide, whether for social, religious, or whatever reasons, or they want to make it harder for the tax man to get at them because there's less records to find on them, and less people to track that they can find proof is connected to them. So, you have a somewhat pagan-connected group publishing her book, which takes, apparently, with that title, Notorious, apparently the same general attitude towards life. I haven't read it yet, but I guess it's another pornographic autobiography like Mamie Van Doren's. You got, apparently she liked, her friends included a bunch of homosexuals and bisexuals, whatever. And she liked to have her picture taken looking like some sensuous, mindless hayseed with always got this hay straw in her mouth. And I don't know whether that was a hint that she was into oral sex or whether it was just trying to look like the farmer's horny daughter waiting for the next traveling salesman to come along. Some kind of the same Estena publishing thing has two other videos up there. One, a woman with a book. It claims the book is about someone who supposedly gets messages from animals. And the other one is some rustic down-home cooking thing, and the woman's wearing this big, long wide brim floppy thing. I mean, the whole atmosphere reminds me of what it was probably like. This is sort of society that the Wicker Man people had, but once in a while to keep it fertile and rustic and so forth. And they had to do something a little bit unusual, a human sacrifice. Well, no, I'm not saying that people, they stay necessarily involved in that stuff. I'm just saying that there's something a little too wholesome, and a little bit too, maybe a little bit on the dreamy side, and a little too, I don't know, something which would be the outer edges of the enchantment bullshit. And the connection with heavy metal music, the very fact that the term itself has occultic connections is kind of interesting. Again, we get back to the agenda. Now, notice something here. There are two categories. If you're going to worry about offending someone, okay? Well, you don't want to imply he was a secret fag because that's fags will get upset. You don't want to imply he was a secret something else because something else will get upset. There's very few categories left that are not enough of a economic power voting block or something that you got to worry about offending. The non-safe, sane, and consensuous, well, it was consensual, it wasn't safe and wasn't sane what he was doing, allegedly doing. But the safe, sane, and consensual, the people who are not into safe, sane, and consensual BDSM, bondage and discipline, sadomasochism, they're a small enough group that you don't got to worry about offending them. They won't care. Or if they do care, what are they going to do? And they don't have any backup from the larger picture of their community. The date rape crowd is probably more extensive in population than it appears to be, but again, this is not something that, they don't have a stripe for them on the alphabet pervert flag, and they're not gonna, the rapists and so forth, you don't have to worry about offending them because they're not, about the only thing left you can accuse somebody of and not risk offending somebody in doing so by denouncing, by holding this stuff up as being evil, is a non-safe or sane S&M, BDSM thing on the one hand, or rape on the other, and that's about it. And these things will get all sides, all sections of the political spectrum mad at you. Now, he was an influence, and for a long time, and still is to some extent, for this very objective facts attitude and not be running around in a trance and having all kinds of wild speculation or whatever, but at the same time not ignoring something that's an important detail. And this is, in other words, the opposite of running around in a touched by the fae in trance state, or borderline trance state, or light trance. And this is the state that these people, that everybody seems to be in. Whether actually in that state or just going along because the money is flowing as long in the power, with the extreme liberal stuff going on. So, I think it's an effort to undermine whatever influence he might still have. And also, a lot of people became cops or emergency EMT because of his other series, Emergency, and stuff like that. They were inspired by what they saw. And his material was used to improve efficiency and propriety in some police training. So, they just want to undermine this, I think. And anyway, Amy Van Doren's story doesn't fly too well for one set of reasons, and this one doesn't either. So, basically, she has a lot of facts wrong, alleges the existence of a secret room that somebody who lived there for a few years would have known about and didn't. And it's claims they dated all that summer, and yeah, we dated all summer. There's the line. That's the thing she said in the interview. Also, the same phrase. Well, no, she didn't, because she only dated in March and April, and then he married in June someone else. So I don't buy this at all. And that's somebody else who moved into that apartment during the time frame she claimed that this happened. And she thinks it's so, she only thinks she bothers to mention his belt being used. She thought he was going to take his belt off, as it was totally normal to wear a belt to bed, otherwise naked. So she doesn't even mention that he comes to bed with a belt naked to add to the, she could have thrown that in to add to the weirdness of the whole situation. But no, I don't buy this story at all.